Bom dia a todos. É uma satisfação darmos o início nesse 7º webinar da série comemorativa aos 20 anos do programa FAPESP. Este webinar focará na questão de centros de síntese, que nós vemos como uma evolução da organização da pesquisa feita dentro do programa. Talvez seja uma próxima etapa do programa. Good morning, welcome all. We are starting the 7th webinar on the series commemorating the 20 years of the BIOTA program. And for this webinar, we will be focusing on Biodiversity Synthesis Center. This is a new way of organizing biodiversity research. It's a more applied focus and different from the other webinars where we had a first presentation of the impact the program did in that area. This time we are presenting something that we're looking to the future. We think that this will be one of the next stages of the BIOTA program, developing this webinar, this synthesis center. As always, I will ask you all to send your questions to contato@biota.org.br. The questions will be answered only during the webinar, and this webinar is being recorded and is being also transmitted by YouTube. So now I would like to introduce Professor Luiz Eugênio Melo, the Scientific Director of FAPESP, for the welcome words. Good morning, Luiz Eugênio.
Good morning, Professor Joly. Good morning, good afternoon, good night to you all, depending on where you are on the globe. It's a pleasure to open this current session on the BIOTA program. It's one of the most successful programs that FAPESP has developed, and that's a lot thanks to the great leadership of Professor Joly, as well as Professor Jean-Paul Metzger and other colleagues. On today's event, as Professor Joly already mentioned, we will hear about the synthesis portion or the center of synthesis that was also a proposition made by some of you here, either in the audience or as the speakers. And we're glad to have also Professor Kendra Cheruvelil as a participant on today's event. I will take today's opportunity just to mention that we're currently on an evaluation or the final stages of an assessment process for different proposals associated with the institutes of research in the state of São Paulo, and there is a proposition made on a synthesis center, which has received high rates of evaluation, and so it's a sort of a spoiler mentioning that it has a good chance of succeeding and being approved. So with those encouraging words, I will hand back the stage to Professor Joly.
Well, thank you, Professor Luiz Eugênio. This is certainly encouraging words, and we hope that the proposal is accepted. But now it's my pleasure to give the floor to Professor Jean-Paul Metzger. Jean-Paul is a member of the steering committee of the BIOTA-FAPESP. He is a professor in the Department of Ecology, Institute of Bioscience, University of São Paulo, and he'll be talking about the BIOTA Center for Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services Synthesis. Jean-Paul, the floor is with you.
Thank you very much, Carlos, for this short introduction, and also Luis Melo for the welcome words, and also for the spoiler, so I can do a more happy presentation now about the Synthesis Center initiative that we do have with BIOTA-FAPESP. I will begin sharing my screen. And I hope that you are all seeing my slides. So as Carlos Jolie just said, the idea is not to, as the past webinars of BIOTA-FAPESP, to make a synthesis of what we have done in the last 20 years with this BIOTA program, but much more to present maybe a new activity of the BIOTA in the next maybe 20 years that we think it's could be a good way to synthesize and to give more value to the data that BIOTA has collected in the past. So first, before presenting what is Synthesis Center, what is the importance of those centers, the functions of those centers, I think it's important to mention that why we think that a Synthesis Center or Synthesis Initiative would be a nice idea for the BIOTA program. First, we have a lot of data. BIOTA-FAPESP has worked in the last 20 years collecting biodiversity data, information about conservation, restoration, use of biodiversity, and how we can manage biodiversity. And all those data is available, so it's open access. It's available in a geographical information system, so we can easily cross this data with other socio-ecological, socioeconomic data to have different kind of analysis. So we have a lot of data and data that can be used, that is can be accessed by different persons in the world. Second, we have a well-established research community with more than 1,000 researchers, some seniors, some young researchers that publish a lot. We have some data from the Web of Science with more or less 6,000 publications in the last 20 years. So it's a lot of information with people that is able to use this data to answer questions. So maybe some of the questions that we do have now, or some of the environmental problems that we do have now, don't need new data to be answered. And this is the main function of a Synthesis Center, which is to generate knowledge with existing data. So the Synthesis Center is basically a kind of facility that could allow to incubate new ideas, insights, hypotheses, or to provide new models with existing data. So what we do have in those centers is an infrastructure for meetings. So we need basically one big room for meeting, 2 breakout rooms. We need a small staff, permanent staff of people that can provide some support. That could be logistic, informatics support, or support related to education, information diffusion. In some cases, we have facilitators for the meetings. So the idea is to have those facilities to facilitate the work of the synthesis groups. So what are these synthesis groups? They are basically heterogeneous group of persons, seniors, young researchers, persons with different backgrounds, women, men. So we have, it's important to have this heterogeneity, to have new ideas, and to work not in a competitive way, but in a collaborative way. The main idea is to stimulate, to have an environment that can stimulate what we call this lateral, associative, or creative thinking that I think that Kendra we will talk in her presentation later. So the idea is to think out of the box and to try to understand which challenges can be considered in the border of different disciplines, and not only using your own background. So trying to work in an interdisciplinary approach or a transdisciplinary approach. The working group, they do these immersions, so this long meeting of 1 week, where we do have formal and informal space to create trust between the members of those groups, in a way that they can exchange ideas and maybe creating new insights and new ideas in the frontiers of current science. So, and all that using existing data, not really collecting new data, going to the lab to do new experiments. The idea is, as we do have in the BIOTA-FAPESP, we have a lot of data, we have a lot of people, so we can answer some questions, some problems, only analyzing or linking different data banks. So this is the main idea of the Synthesis Center, is to facilitate this kind of analysis and this kind of environments that will allow to see those data in different ways, supporting reanalysis, recontextualization of the data. And also, some of those synthesis centers, they are more solution-oriented or problem-oriented, in a way that they can put together the good science with the application, the co-creation of environmental policies. So they can be a place where you have transformation science, so science that can improve the benefits that nature can bring to people, and where we can create a new and better solution to have a better life quality. So this is, in a very short way, a presentation of what is a synthesis center. And just so this model exists in the US since the 90s. So the National Center of Ecological Analysis and Synthesis was created, I think, in 1996 in California. And they do have a lot of well-succeeded history. And I will just present some of those good examples. So one of them, which is quite old, is the group that was organized by Robert Constanza, which was the first group that did a monetary evaluation of ecosystem service for the whole world. And with this paper, which is maybe one of the 20 most cited paper in Nature until now, the research on ecosystem service really increased a lot, because people become aware of the importance of the monetary importance of this ecosystem service. A second example is about the effect of climate change. So using the IPCC models to understand how different scenarios of climate change will impact marine life. So this was published in 2013. And I think this is one of the first good analysis and global analysis for the whole globe about the impact of climate change on marine biodiversity. A third example is about the risk of the declining of pollinators on the production of the world crops. So the risk relates to decline of pollinators, of people, of bees, essentially, on food security. And I think this is from 2007, and they from this alert, let's say it like that, they also informed and they promoted in some way a legislation to protect pollinators and then to assure food security. So it's clear that synthesis centers can have very nice scientific impacts, but I think another contribution from synthesis centers is also the training of a new generation of researchers. And because those synthesis centers, they do have a lot of postdoc associated with the working groups, because these working groups, they meet for 1 week, and between those meetings, who do the job are usually the postdocs with the supervisors. But there is this work from Hampton and Parker where they analyze the publication of postdocs before and after they work in GNCs. And they show that there is an increase in the number of co-authors that after their experience with NCs, which can indicate that an increase in the network of collaboration of those young scientists. And also, even if they do not have an increase in the number of publications, they had an increase in the number of citations, which can also indicate that the quality of those publications has increased. So this is some signs that show that not only synthesis centers can provide a new and important science, but they can also help to train a new generation of scientists that will work with international collaboration, with providing more impacting work. And third, I think besides the scientific impact and the capacity of the synthesis centers to train a new scientist, I think there is an impact in the applied side, in the way that this is an example of a publication that analyzes 2 ways of doing logging without having too much impact. So they are considered as low impact logging, and they consider it one sparing approach and one sharing approach. So how you can have logging with sparing and with sharing without impacting too much, especially climate change by the emission of CO2. And so they publish also in Nature Sustainability, but also they provide a tool that should be used by managers to be able to calculate how different kind of timber management can impact climate change. So this is also another example where the outcome is not only a publication, but it's also a tool that can be used by managers to provide a more sustainable way to have this timber harvest. But so nowadays we have more or less 12 synthesis centers in the world, and you can see that most of them are in the north hemisphere. A lot of one in the United States. Maybe the most known one is GNCs. So the first one in California. We do have nowadays also the CSync in the University of Maryland, and in Europe we have 4 or 5 synthesis centers, like the German one, the FGs, and also the French one, the CESAP. The main problem that I see is that we do not have any synthesis centers in tropical region, and this is the region where we have more biodiversity, where we have more changes and a more fast change in the landscape that can degrade the environment, and so degrade biodiversity that we do have in the tropics. So I think there is a need to mobilize scientists within the tropical region to better understand how we can do good science, good synthesis, and how we can provide solutions for the social environmental problems that we do have in tropical regions. So we do have some initiatives in Brazil to do that. The national initiative is led by CNPq, so the NSF in Brazil, and they are planning, and we are part of this process, planning a physical synthesis center in Brasilia since 2017, but obviously this is a quite difficult situation nowadays to have money to have this physical infrastructure. So what the Symbiosis, so it's the Brazilian National Center of Biodiversity and Ecosystem Service, they are working now with calls in a more virtual way, and they launched the first call last year, from which we selected 7 working groups. But what I think it's important to say that we had 68 proposals, and some of them from the state of São Paulo. So that shows that a lot of research in ecology in Brazil, they are seeking, they would like to do synthesis. And I think there is really a lot of space to develop this kind of approach in Brazil. So CNPq is doing this initiative. FAPESP is also involved in those calls. It was a co-founder of this call. But the idea is also to have something in São Paulo, to have calls related to the BIOTA-FAPESP. And as Luis Eugenio said at the beginning, the steering committee of the BIOTA program, with a lot of other scientists and people from the state government, we all propose an initiative. Is not a center, but it's an initiative to do synthesis to help the state government of São Paulo to solve some of their socio ecological problems. So what we are proposing, and we still do not know, despite the spoiler that Luis Melo just presented in the beginning, but we do not have the result from this proposal. But the idea is to have a nucleus of analysis and synthesis of nature-based solution. So the goal was to have this nucleus of problem-oriented, to develop problem-oriented science. And so the idea from our group was to use ecosystem service, or to use solution that are inspired or supported by nature, which are the ecosystem service, to provide environmental, social, and economical benefits with a low cost, and help and trying to help to build resilience. So this nature-based solution, how they are called, they are. This is an umbrella term that consider since reforestation, restoration, the effects of green space in cities, the importance of some nature ecosystems as mangroves or wetlands, or even the construction of ecosystems that have the same functions of those natural ecosystems as constructed wetland. So the idea is to have these different initiatives in small and large scales in a way that we can use the ecosystem service provided by those areas to solve some of our problems. And in the case of this proposal, we do have basically 5 main challenges that we want to deal with. The first one is related to how we can stimulate pollination in a way that we can assure a higher agricultural productivity and resilience. The second one is how we can implement restoration action with the force code, the implementation of the force code in the state, but in a way also that we can have some economic gains from this activity of restoration. The third one would be about water security and considering how we can assure this water supply and quality considering climate change. The fourth one is about the regulation of zoonotic disease, so how we can use biodiversity, native vegetation to control the spread of zoonotic disease. And we have a lot of data about hantavirus, yellow fever, and now with COVID, this is really a hot topic. And finally, we also would like to better understand how we can manage green space in cities in a way that we can prevent some of the chronic disease and mental disease that we do have in cities. So all these 5 thematic challenges, they are related to 2 main missions, which are to provide sustainability both in rural and urban landscapes. And they are all integrated by a policy co-production group that will help to do the link between the science, the knowledge that we will have from the synthesis analysis, but how we can use this data and this knowledge to co-produce policies. And they will also be linked by the great challenge of climate change in a way that climate change can accentuate all those problems, and also because we need to have solutions not only for the situation that we have nowadays, but also we need to have solutions for the future, considering the future climate conditions. So what we are proposing here is to do this synthesis approach, so to get the data, to cross data banks, to do new analysis, models, and so to have the synthesis and to publish those syntheses. But maybe the main objective at the end is to support the co-creation of policies. And that could be to improve existing policies or to review existing policies, but also to create really new policies. So this is the basic idea of this BIOTA synthesis, to have to stimulate more problem or solution-oriented research, to stimulate this participative approach with people from the academia and outside the academia, and to have this policy co-production in a transdisciplinary approach. And I think I'm just finishing that this is not a substitution of what BIOTA-FAPESP is doing, is something to be added. So we know that in 20 years, the BIOTA-FAPESP has produced a lot of data in more basic science, stimulating field work, stimulating education, outreach activities. We do have a sub-program, the Bioprospecta program. The idea is to have this another sub-program that will be the BIOTA synthesis, in a way that we want to do those science as the one that I just presented here, the BIOTA synthesis based on nature-based solution, but also to stimulate calls for other groups to do synthesis with existing data. So, so this is what I would like to present at the beginning, and obviously I will be happy to answer questions. Julie, the word is with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jean-Paul, for this presentation that show the ideas we've been discussing and promoting inside the steering committee of the BIOTA program. And as I said in the beginning, questions should be sent to by email through and we will be answered in the end of the presentations. Now it's with a great pleasure that I invite Professor Kendra Cheruvelil. Kendra is professor in the Department of Fisheries and Wildlife at Michigan State University, and she is also the co-director of the Data-Intensive Landscape Limnology Laboratory. And today, she will be speaking about using the science of team science to advance biological synthesis. Kendra, the floor is with you.
Thank you. Thank you for that introduction. And thank you everyone for joining us today. I'm going to share my screen. That talk that Jean-Paul just gave was very exciting. I'm so happy to hear about the work that you are doing. I think a synthesis center in South America is such an important effort, and I hope that it is successful. The work that comes out of there is so important for our world and meeting the environmental and human health challenges facing us. So I'm here today to talk to you about the science of team science and how that might be helpful when thinking about conducting such research as Jean-Paul talked about in the biological synthesis center that you're proposing. I am from Michigan State University, so hello from let's see, 8 o'clock in the morning up in North America. And I am a aquatic ecologist. So what I'm going to be sharing with you today is a lot of lessons learned from the research that I do with my co-director, Pat Serrano. So the two of us co-direct a lab at Michigan State University where we do big data lake ecology research. And what happened was, both of us were trained sort of traditionally in aquatic ecology, going out and sampling lakes and asking questions and trying to answer questions that put in full screen. I believe it is in full screen, Vera. I'm sorry. That is as big as it gets. So we both were trained traditionally going out and sampling lakes. But what happened over time was that we started to get more and more interested in very big scale questions, such as the ones that Jean-Paul was talking about. And so better understanding how lakes as a population rather than individual lakes, how big populations of lakes were responding to things like climate change and land use intensification and the spread of exotic species. And so we realized that that was not, those types of questions were not going to be able to be answered by going out and sampling individual lakes. Certainly we weren't going to be able to do that ourselves. And so our idea, very much in line with what was being talked about by Jean-Paul, was to build a database that was based on pre-existing data. So we knew that there was data out there that was in existence that could be compiled and harmonized and brought together to be able to answer questions at these large scales of space and time, and also to be thinking about lakes at that population level. And so we embarked on this sort of quest. We started, I don't know, about 15 years ago by building a database of just 5 states in the US of data. We compiled data from 5 states. And we had so much fun using those data to answer ecology questions that we then decided to move to get even bigger. And so we formed a team and to build this database, and we call the database Lagos. And so what I'm going to be sharing with you today is a lot about from lessons that we've learned with our Lagos teams. And so here at the top, you see a compilation of faces. These are people who are on our first team that started in 2011. And again, our goal was to study lake water quality and its controls. And so we went to the United States National Science Foundation to seek funding for this effort to really build a database where we could ask these sorts of questions. And this first team was about a dozen people. It varied depending on the year and what graduate students were with us and so on and so forth. And it included 3 institutions. And one of the things that we realized when we were doing this research is that we really needed to have multiple disciplines involved. We really needed experts who were not just ourselves, the aquatic ecologists, but we also needed people who were experts in GIS and spatial analysis. We needed database experts, people who could do the workflows and the coding to really harmonize all these different data sets that we were pulling from all over the country. And we needed data scientists to help us understand these large amounts of data. So it sounds like your program has large amounts of data. So you probably also are thinking about pulling in people for your synthesis center that you'd want to have teams to include statisticians and machine learners and data miners, for example. And so our team started out pretty diverse. And what we did was we created LAGOS. So that's the Lake Multiscale Geospatial and Temporal Database. And so this was a lake and watershed and landscape database for the 51,000 lakes in the 17 northeastern and upper Midwestern states in the US. And this was a really big effort, building this database and compiling it and harmonizing all the data and authoring all the metadata. I'll just put in a plug for the Synthesis Center, really getting help with thinking through how metadata will be handled and as the projects come in. This was a really big effort. It took us almost 5 years to build this database. But it was a really cool effort. We came up, so 51,000 lakes is the census population. So it's all of the lakes in this area. And we ended up being able to compile within lake water chemistry, water clarity, variables for about 10,000 of those. So about a fifth of the data, a fifth of the lakes we actually had in situ lake data for. And some of those data have multiple time steps. And so for some lakes, we actually have long-term data reaching back, decades. And so this graphic just shows you sort of where the long-term data come from. And so when we finished that project in 2016, Pat and I guess we were a glutton for punishment because we decided that we wanted to go even bigger. And we wanted to do all of the conterminous US, so the 48 states in contiguous US. We wanted to really pull together all those data. And so what that meant was we added even more people to the team. We went back to our National Science Foundation for additional funding. We added another institution, and we added even more data scientists to our team. And so that's what we are working on now. And so the idea is that we have now our census population now of all lakes in the conterminous US is 350,000. And we hope that we'll have data at the end of all this for, again, about 20% of them, in situ data. But of course, we're not just collecting the in-lake data, right? We're collecting all the information about all these lakes watersheds. And so all the different pressures, all the different natural features, things like temperature, precipitation, land use. And one of the things that's so exciting about this effort is if you look at the western part of these maps, right? There's just a lot of variation ecologically in the US out west that we haven't been able to really explore yet. There are great limnologists working in the Western US, but no one has been working quite at the scale that we are. And so we're going to be able to ask some really cool regional scale questions about lakes in the US by when we finish this data set. And in fact, we are getting close. You might have noticed that our end date is only a year away. Now with COVID, we have been slowed down a bit. And so we likely will have a year extension. But we are getting close. And in fact, our first module of LAGOS US is going to be submitted for peer review as a data paper. So it'll be released to everyone and be publicly available We're about ready to submit that. So you could be looking for that maybe, you know, in 6 months' time. All of our data sets for the Northeastern US, so Lagos Northeast, are all available publicly. I was excited to hear that Jean-Paul was talking about your data being available publicly. I think that is a huge advance for science. And so that's really wonderful. And so this first module, Lagos US Locus, that will be available soon. Okay, so that is the background, the context for within which I come. And so that is how it is that I started really trying to understand how to help research teams be effective. So Pat and I wanted to pull together all these people. We all had the goal of building a database and then conducting original research with that database. And so what was our strategy? How did we go about doing that? And how could that help with your BIOTA Synthesis Center? So first, of course, we had to build and foster a productive research team. And in fact, we've done this 3 times, first in 2005 with a relatively small team, and then in 2010 with a bigger team about double the size, and then in 2016 with a team that was even double that size. So we've done this multiple times. Then we were going to create Lagos by building the technical infrastructure, compiling and harmonizing all sorts of data sets, and documenting workflow. We were going to then use Lagos to advance research in ecology and in data science. We do that by developing novel algorithm, answering lots of cool questions, and really trying to understand how lakes are changing in response to other changes. And then, of course, as an outcome, we were going to publish all sorts of multi-authored research articles. So in a typical science talk, what I would be focusing on are these 2 middle bullets. But of course, this talk is about the science of team science and how it can advance synthesis work. And so what I'm going to focus on for the rest of my talk is actually on the first bullet, which is how to build and foster a productive research team. And then on the last bullet of publishing multi-authored research articles, because these 2 points are so critical for science to be done and for science to be effective and to be impactful. However, as scientists, we're often not trained on how to do these things. And so we overlook them as being just, you know, oh, naturally, we're going to know how to foster and produce come up with a good research team, right? So we just assume that will all fall in place. And we just assume that publishing multi-authored research articles, there'll be no problem with that, and that will just be the automatic outcome of all the great science we do. But in fact, there's a whole body of literature out there that gives us tips and tells us why that's not the case and what sorts of things we can do to advance our research teams. And that's called the science of team science. And it has its roots in organizational psychology and in business and in education. It's come from lots of different fields. But Pat and I have found it extremely helpful to dive into that literature and to really understand what makes a team really tick and how to really help a team be effective. And so I'm going to focus on first how to build and foster a productive research team. And so you could be thinking about this in terms of if you're someone who wants to put in a proposal for a synthesis group, what is it that you want to do when thinking about pulling together the team of people you'd want to be involved in that synthesis project? And then you could also be thinking about it from as a reviewer of those proposals, right? Does it look like the people in charge have a plan for really building a strong team? So lots of different ways you could be thinking about this. So how do you build and foster a great research team? Again, as scientists, we tend to focus on research outcomes. We care all about generating transformative knowledge, creating the new high performance teams based on current research, translating all of that great knowledge to management, conservation, and policy, to classrooms, and to the public, right? That's what we focus on. However, we're not going to get to these outcomes unless we have really effective team communication and team functioning. And you might say, okay, sure, what does that mean? So I'll talk about it. And you can't get to good team communication and team functioning if you don't have strong interpersonal skills and a diverse team. And so I'm going to start here at the top talking about, well, what do I mean by team diversity and what do I mean by interpersonal skills and how can we do better with those? So there's lots of different dimensions of diversity that can make up a team. Certainly people, when they hear the word diversity, they think first of demographics, things like race, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, those sorts of things. And yes, they matter and they are important parts of our identities. However, there's all sorts of things on a team that contribute to its diversity. So the points of view that people have, what career stage they're part of. So John Paul talked about having students and postdocs and professors and people from agencies, right, as part of these synthesis projects. And so that career stage, having people from all different career stages, that introduces a lot of diversity on a team. There's also this thing called degree of incumbency. So how many people on the team have worked together previously? And they found that there's actually a little sort of a sweet spot in terms of having about 40% of the people on a team having worked together previously, and then a bunch of other people who are new and can bring novel ideas can really help to increase the productivity of a team and its functioning. And then we have interaction modes. So this is so on a team, there are going to be some people who are generalists and have lots of information, lots of knowledge about lots of different disciplines and methods. And then there will be specialists, people who are really domain experts in one thing and one thing only. And then there'll be some people who are what we call brokers, who are people who build connections between those disciplines or even between different teams. And so making sure that you have a diversity of those interaction modes on a team can be really helpful for the team. And finally, of course, we talk about disciplinary balance. So it's very important in these synthesis projects to make sure you have the right people at the table to be able to contribute their expertise and their understanding of different fields. However, you need to have some balance. It's very difficult, for example, if you have a team of 12 people and there's only one social scientist who is asked to do all of the interpretation from a social science perspective. You really need to be thinking about balance. Now, the next layer, the next box in that figure was interpersonal skills. And some people call these soft skills, but the idea is that these are all the aspects of how people interact with each other on a team. And so we tend to think about those as two types of interpersonal skills. The first is social sensitivity, things like empathy, honesty, clarity, integrity, and accountability. And then the second is emotional engagement. And so this is more about excitement about the research and commitment to the team and building trust. And the reality is that interpersonal skills, people tend to think that you're just born with them. But the reality is that you're taught them, you learn them, and you practice them, and you get better at them. And so the idea is that if team leaders really spend some time talking about and helping people learn these skills and practice them, that your team will really benefit. So then that next level down in that figure talked about team communication and functioning skills. Again, these are learned and practiced skills, things that we can get better at. As scientists, we're not often taught how to effectively communicate with each other. This is something we need to be taught and we need to really take seriously. So things like idea generation, communication, decision-making, time management, and not just individual time management, but time management for the entire team. So thinking about if you have 12 people working together on a team and you're supposed to have a deliverable done in a year, thinking through, well, who all is going to be able to help on that team during different phases of that project, and really talking about it and explicitly planning for people's schedules and their needs and what they can provide, that can be really helpful. And finally, conflict management. As scientists, many of us are very conflict averse, and we tend to avoid conflict and try to live in a conflict-free zone, and we think that, you know, science should be conflict-free unless you're talking about ideas. Often we're fine arguing over a very specific scientific idea, but we tend to avoid interpersonal conflict. However, as teams get bigger and they get more diverse, there is going to be more conflict. And actually, conflict is not a bad thing. So there's all sorts of research that shows that teams will be more productive after they've successfully weathered conflict. And so the idea that team leaders, and in fact, everybody on a team, be trained in conflict management, to be brought up to speed on the different modes of handling conflict and the way that we tend to respond to conflict, and bringing awareness about that at the team level, and having some professional development in that area can really help your team become very effective. Okay, so coming back to that beginning piece, right? We said that what we're really interested in is the bottom here, right? We want best science outcomes for both individuals and teams. And so to do that, we need to build this diverse team of experts. And so I just presented you with some ideas on what are the things you might want to be thinking about when you are building a diverse team of experts for a project. And then as a reviewer, maybe what you might be looking for in a proposal that demonstrates that the people have been very thoughtful about who they're going to bring together to work on a project, and that they're talking about helping to develop their team professionally in these areas that will help the team be successful. And so one of the challenges, though, so now you have this, so say, you know, you've bought in, you've created a very diverse team, you've brought everybody together, you've written a proposal, it's been funded, and you're going to get together for the first time. Well, it's not going to then just be easy, unfortunately. That one of the challenges to conducting research in large and interdisciplinary teams is that you have to then understand, value, and capitalize on the wide range of disciplinary cultures and practices that people bring to bear. The reality is that we come from different disciplines, we come from different backgrounds, we come from different geographies. We bring with us expectations about how things are going to be done that may not be aligned with how everybody else is thinking. And so what we've done through time, and this didn't all happen in year one, let me tell you, and it's still a work in progress, is we've figured out that it's very important to incorporate team culture and climate, team policy, and team practice, really thinking about all three of those aspects to really maximize our team function. And so what does that really look like? And so I'm going to go through a couple examples from Lagos to really help you understand what we're talking about here. The first example will be identifying research questions that engage in experts from multiple disciplines, and then we'll talk about balancing individual and team needs when writing co-authored publications. So the first part, how do we, as a team, so if you think about, maybe you pull together 12 people to work on a project, you submit it as a proposal, it gets funded, and you say, okay, we're going to go use existing data, we're going to do synthetic research to answer this really cool question. And you have a team of researchers who are coming from, say, some sort of data science field like statistics or data mining. You have ecologists who focus on biodiversity, perhaps. Maybe you have some geneticists who are there, right? So how is it that you can identify research questions that really engage everybody and that can help advance more than just one discipline? Well, one of the first things that we found to be very important was to really have discussions about what is it that counts as research. And so thinking through and having conversations about what is research and what is good science. Because the reality is many of us were brought up in the science, in academia and in science, in a field that thought, quote unquote, good science was being at a lab bench or going out into the field and then analyzing your own data. Well, that is not the research that we're talking about doing here. We're talking about using pre-existing data to do synthetic research, to ask different kinds of questions and to answer them in different ways. And so this paper here we wrote back in a few years ago really talks about how to have those, or really talks about broadening our definition of what is good science and how we value science. And that's something that on a very interdisciplinary team can be really helpful to talk about. Now, our second piece is that over time we had to wrestle with and be okay with the fact that we cannot always achieve perfectly interdisciplinary research products. There will not always be the sort of mecca that you're looking for that brings it all together. So in our case, data scientists, especially the graduate students on our team who are in, say, computer science or statistics, for their dissertations, they need to develop novel methods. They need to develop novel algorithms that can get published in computer science or statistics journals. Well, ecologists often really what they want to do is they want to do novel ecological research, asking novel ecological questions using existing data science methods. So there's this sort of mismatch there sometimes. And so really thinking through how you're going to meet both individual needs and team needs is very important. And the way that we've sort of landed on this is realizing that there's 3 types of research that can result in different outcomes. So the first one is that real, true sort of interdisciplinary work where you have a novel data science approach and you have an ecological question. And what happens is you have a novel method published in a data science journal, and there's a novel original research question that's answered in ecology that's published in an ecology journal, right? And so this happens, but it doesn't happen all the time. A different type of research is where you take existing data science, so stats or computer science, data mining approaches, that kind of thing, and you apply it to a novel ecology question, and then that gets published in an ecology disciplinary journal. And then thirdly, you might have a bunch of ecology data. So our 50,000 lakes, that data could be very helpful for people in data mining, for our graduate students in statistics, to use to develop novel data science algorithms. And so that happens, and they might publish in a computer science proceedings or in a journal, right? But it's in data science, and that's a very different sort of outcome. And in fact, on our team, we've had all 3 types of research and multiple examples of those. These are just a couple, 3 examples for each type of outcome, where you see in the middle here, we have just ecologists as first authors publishing in ecology journals. The bottom, these are all graduate students in statistics or computer science who published in computer science or statistics journals. And then up here, it's these are the pairs of papers where we have this is a computer scientist, and then myself, of course, a computer scientist, and another ecologist, right? And so there we do have examples of all of these types of research happening. And so having the conversation about, well, what's our goal in terms of products, and can we make sure that we are meeting everyone's needs, can be very important right from the outset. So the second example that I'd like to give you is to talk about, okay, so now you've built this diverse team, you've talked about all the different research questions that you want to be able to answer that meet both individual needs and the team needs. Now you get to the point of actually doing the research and thinking about writing all those papers. And now you really need to think about, well, how do we balance individual and team needs when writing these co-authored publications? And this often gets overlooked as an area that will just, sort of happen organically. However, as you get to bigger and more diverse teams, I would argue that it's very important to really think about this in a careful way, and to really be thinking about culture, policy, and practice to really make sure that you are maximizing your effectiveness in writing these papers. So let me step you through an example of how this could look. So first, we'll talk about it from a culture or climate sort of perspective. Our Lagos teams, we've come up with some guiding principles for co-authored publications. And so these are the sort of things that we always try to come back to when we're trying to decide how to manage a collaborative manuscript. And these look something like this. So our guiding principles are efficiency and productivity, right? We want to get as many publications as possible, and hopefully the shortest amount of time. We want to be transparent. So we want to make sure all 25 people on our team know what publications are being worked on at all times. We want to make sure we have individual and team accountability, that we're really maximizing creativity. We don't want to end up with groupthink. We want instead for people to be innovative and thinking about really novel ideas. We also want to protect and promote our early career team members, students and postdocs and assistant professors. We really want to make sure that they are being promoted and protected in this process. You know, the number of publications and where they get published and when, that is huge in terms of people's career development. And so that's very important for us. And finally, we have a guiding principle of inclusion and fairness, and making sure that we are including the people who should be, that we're being fair about it, but not including people who haven't done enough to really be a co-author. And so this is a lot of guiding principles, but through a series of conversations and many years of publishing together, this is what we as a team settled on, is these 6 guiding principles. Now they're laid out here on this balance because the challenge is that some of these guiding principles are actually sort of competing with each other, okay? And so the idea of how is it that we actually maximize efficiency while also maximizing inclusion and fairness, for example, that may not always, there may be some tension there. And of course, maximizing benefits for individuals versus the team can actually be in competition sometimes. And so thinking through how is that going to work is very important. And so one solution to how we deal with that is with a team authorship policy. And I would highly recommend that any team working together on a synthesis project think through what they would like for a team authorship policy. So what is this? It's a document that describes the team's procedures and guidelines related to manuscript development. And it really, authorship policies can provide a lot of things. They give you the best practices for the team to strive for. It gives you an opportunity to discuss authorship, to get the conversation started, especially for those with less power on the team. It can clarify expectations, roles, and responsibilities, and really add transparency to authorship decisions and help you in assigning credit. And here are just 6 things that we think it's really important to include in an authorship policy. The link here is available. It's a template that Pat and I have developed for authorship policies that teams can use to adapt for their own purposes. So we want to make sure it has a date or a version number. It's a living document. So this is something that we come back to time and time again. I think in our team right now, we're on version 15 or something like that, right? Because as new people join the team and other people leave, you have different needs and different ideas come in. So you always want to be revisiting it. You have the goal and the guiding principles of the policy. You have a description of the activities that warrant authorship. So what is it that people need to do to be considered an author? A strategy for assigning authorship. So authorship order can be a sticky situation. So let's have a strategy for that and make sure it's explicit and we talk about it early. A description of article types and how those different article types might result in different needs. So for example, you might have a very traditional research article that's very different from a methods development article, which is also very different from more of a commentary or an essay article. And then of course there's dissertation or thesis chapters, which have different needs, right? And then finally, expectations of lead authors and co-authors. Now it's best when this policy is co-created by all team members, not just the lead PI or the leadership team. And it's best when all manuscripts have an author contribution statement. And so that is a statement that tells people who read the paper what all people did, what were the contributions. Some journals are requiring these now. If the journal that you use doesn't require it, what we've done is we've published it as part of the acknowledgement section in our papers. Okay, So then another solution to trying to balance all these different sort of guiding principles is, in practice, how manuscripts are managed. So having different strategies for managing co-authored, collaborative manuscripts. So what does this mean? This is how the lead author or lead authors, we actually advocate on our team, co-lead authors a lot. So a pair of people who are working together to lead a team, for example. How they manage the manuscript tasks, including decision-making, timelines, soliciting contributions, and delegating tasks. And you might ask, well, what difference do these strategies really make? It really, if you think about the ways that we do these things, if we are explicit about them and we have conversations about them, it's going to provide clarity for co-author contributions and expectations. It allows for a diverse range of lead author working styles, right? So we build a diverse team. We need to expect that people are going to manage manuscripts in diverse ways. It can also facilitate alignment of manuscript type with a best suited strategy, and can allow the team to balance those sometimes competing goals and principles. So what are these different manuscript management strategies? So we had a lot of fun coming up with 5 scenarios of different types of manuscript management strategies that we saw in our team. Now, there could be others out there. I invite any of you to share those with us, with me, if you come up with one. These are in a paper that a group of postdocs led up in our team. And so the idea is that the number of lead authors, so those making major decisions, increases along the X, and the degree of interdependency increases along the Y. And we came up with these 5 major categories of manuscript styles that we named kind of in a funny way, right? So a lone wolf, you might be able to imagine what that is, right? It's one lead author who's working quite independently from most of the rest of the authors. So the degree of interdependency is low. A dynamic duo, that's with that pair of 2 lead authors. But again, the rest of the co-authors are they're not as interdependent, right? So we just have the 2. Then we have this management style that we call the board of directors, where you have 3 or more lead authors that are sort of weighing in on all the major decisions. And then 5, or 4th, we have this roundtable effect where all co-authors are actually involved in all decision making. And so you can imagine what that might be like, right? It definitely is not going to be the most efficient process, but it includes everybody in all those decision making, in all the decision making. And then finally over here, the organized chaos, where you have one lead author, but then they are really using the rest of the authors in a very much this high degree of interdependency. And in our team, we've actually experienced all 5 of these management strategies. And really what they can do is they can help us to balance those competing demands. So right at the round table, that priority principle is inclusion. And at the other end of the spectrum, the lone wolf, the priority principle is efficiency. And there isn't one that's better than the other. It's really about what's best suited for the person or people leading the manuscript and their needs and the needs of the team. So what is the outcome of these the policies and the practices that we put in place? Be thinking about culture and climate, thinking about an authorship policy and developing it and co-creating it and coming back to it, and then putting in place these different management authorship management styles. Well, we've had about 60 research manuscripts come out from the team so far, and about 40% of those, so a high number, are multidisciplinary. And the average number of authors per paper has been about 8. So Jean-Paul talked about how doing synthetic research means you have more co-authors. And after doing synthetic research, people tend to keep more co-authors in their teams, right? That's what we have experienced as well. Lots of co-authors and lots of interdisciplinary research. It's been very, very, very rewarding. So to bring this all together, right, we want to build a diverse team of experts. And we talked about the ways to do that is to really value and seek out diversity in all different types of dimensions, right? Not just demographic diversity, but career stage and disciplinary diversity and what types of interaction modes, all that sort of thing. And then to learn and practice inclusive excellence, interpersonal skills, communication skills, and team functioning skills. So really spending time on these things. A lot of times scientists don't think of this as quote unquote science, but without this, we can't do our science. So these are very important. And then we talk about incorporating team culture, policy, and practice to really maximize team function. And so there we want to build and value that positive team culture or climate. We want to value and encourage the full range of research article types and support both individuals and the teams and the team as a whole, right? Making sure that we're having the conversations about what individuals' needs are, and we are really supporting individuals as well as meeting the needs, the goals of the team. And then co-creating and following authorship policies and practices that really, again, balance that individual and team needs. And so and then lastly, I just want to point out that these two boxes, they're highly interconnected, right? You're going to have the absolute best team experience. You're going to come out with the best outcomes from a synthesis center if both of these things are being really maximized. So some resources for all of you, should you want to learn more. On our Lagos website, which is here, we have team policies that we put out there for people to share and download and adapt for their teams. We have our authorship policy. We have how we manage collaborative manuscripts. We have a data sharing policy. The data sharing, I didn't speak about that, but that's going to be very important for your teams as well, as to talk about how and who and when you're going to share your data. File sharing, including code sharing expectations and personnel expectations. And then we also have published some of this team science work as an outcome from Lagos. As we have built our teams and troubleshooted and really tried to maximize team functioning, we realized that we could give back to the field of ecology by publishing some of what we've learned. And so in 2014, we published a paper in Frontiers in Ecology and the Environment about creating and maintaining high-performing teams. I will mention the appendix for this, which is online only, has a lot of helpful information about ways to build interpersonal skills and team functioning skills in teams. We also published the paper I talked to you about with the co-author, the manuscript management styles, and that is in Ecosphere. Pat and I have published a template for any team to use for an authorship policy, and that's up on Figshare. And then most recently, Pat and I published a paper about how we really believe that data-intensive ecological research is catalyzed by using open science and team science together with these data science approaches. And so that may be of interest for you and thinking about the way you want your synthesis center to run. And finally, I did want to mention that as your synthesis center gets going, I'm confident it's going to be funded and you're going to be moving along. I mean, the number of proposals you got is amazing. As that's happening, you may want to reach out to, there's a program at my university, Michigan State, that's funded by the National Science Foundation. That's called Cyber Ambassadors. I'm a trained facilitator for this, but it's a program that helps teams build those teamwork skills, and they do a lot of their training. They're now, of course, being able to do a lot of it remote, and so that might be of interest for some of you. And with that, I will close. I'm happy to answer questions, and thank you again for the invitation.
Well, Kendra, thank you for this very inspiring presentation with a lot of ideas, suggestions, and sharing experiences on organizing team science or using deep science for producing synthesis. This will be of great importance for us now that we are starting this process of establishing a center here. And I have quite a lot of questions from the audience. I will start with a question to Jean-Paul, a question by Ariudo Diaz. Ariudo is now a guest researcher at the Goethe University in Frankfurt. And he wants to know how will be the coordination between the Biota Synthesis Center and the Brazilian Symbiose, and also if there is any planning for calls in terms of students and researchers. This is for you, Jean-Paul.
Thank you, Jolie. So maybe in São Paulo, we do have two different kind of initiatives. So we have this proposal. So the biota synthesis based on nature-based solution will be led by myself, Carlos Jolie, Gert Pavlovec. So it's a lot of people from the state of São Paulo. And so we have these 5 different thematic groups. Each one will be, so each of these groups are working groups with their own leader. It's more or less as we do have 5 working groups in the same project. So it's a very big team with more than 100 people involved. It will depend, obviously, if FAPESP will get the budget or not. So what we are planning is to work with Symbiose, so with the Brazilian initiative. One of the idea is to have joint calls. In this exact moment, we are planning a joint call between CESAP, so the French Synthesis Center, and Symbiose and FAPESP. And I think this could be a good idea to work together, so to put people in a collaborative way, also to have synthesis initiatives together, so within Brazil and in collaboration Brazil with other countries. And about calls for young people, for the moment, this is not planned yet, but I like the idea to have these senior sabbatical fellowships, and also to have independent postdoc working with their own synthesis as SDIV in Germany used to do. So we can have postdoc involved in working groups. So this is what we are planning now, but maybe in the future we can have these other calls. In FAPESP we have this Jovem Pesquisador possibilities, which would be a nice idea to stimulate young people to lead synthesis. But for the moment, this is only plans for the future.
Thank you, Jean-Paul. I have a question for Kendra. It says team size can be associated with outcomes. For instance, some studies have found that small teams are more likely to generate new and disruptive ideas, whereas large teams are more likely to further develop such breakthroughs. From your experience in Lagos, Kendra, is this applied, or how does it work?
Yeah, that was a really interesting paper that the whoever asked the question is referring to. I don't know that in Lagos I've necessarily seen a difference as we've gotten bigger. So we have sort of 3 iterations of teams, but each time getting bigger. And I don't think I have seen a difference in sort of novel ideas versus generalities coming out of those teams. More what I've seen change through time is the increase in sort of need for sort of structure for the team and creating sub teams. So the reality is now that we're so large at 25 people that we only really get together once a year as a team, as a whole team. We have one all hands meeting a year. And we do have monthly calls that most people are able to make. But instead, what's happened is we really form sub-teams around particular questions. And so it's almost like we're a team of teams, right? And so I think that that's more what I've seen evolve through time in our for Lagos. But I agree that paper was really interesting in terms of the outcomes of teams, depending on the size of them.
There is another question for you. This is from Paula Castro. She's on the BIOTA communication team. And she asks, how do you see the role of science communication in Lagos, both within the team and with the outside?
Yeah, science communication is so very important. And we do not have a science communication expert on our team. We have used various SciComm sort of domain experts as consultants as we've gone through, you know, helping us with particular aspects of our research that we really wanted to make sure made it to certain audiences. We've never had the luxury of having the budget to actually employ somebody who could really help infuse all of our work with this, the understanding and awareness and importance of SciComm. And I think that would be an amazing thing if your synthesis center had somebody who is an expert, and maybe you already do, that person could really interface with the synthesis projects to make sure that people right from the very beginning are considering multiple audiences and how they're going to really engage with them. That would be amazing. We've had to sort of do it in an ad hoc consulting kind of way, and so that's certainly not going to be as effective.
Yes, this is actually, it is a requirement from FAPESP in the call that it was made, that you need to have a team person at the level of coordinator or associated with the direction, link it to communication. So you really need somebody with that kind of skills right from the beginning of the work. And we are we felt the enormous difference in the BIOTA when we actually established a communication team that is Paula Castro and Erica Spaglish that are leading that, because you start to reach another communities or other communities that not, so you're getting out of the university and the scientific community and get in contact through social media, through articles that you, and at the same time they write a bulletin that is for the program, that is to bring together people from the program, and I think it's working.
That's excellent.
Very nice.
That's really great.
A question for Jean-Paul from Kaina Agostini from the Federal University of São Carlos. There are actually two questions. Besides the Brazilian budgetary question, what are the other challenges for the establishment of a synthesis center? And a second question, Jean-Paul, if you can answer it as well. Synthesis centers are extremely important for all fields of knowledge. With this in mind, it's very important to join efforts so that the synthesis centers get off the paper. Here in Brazil, it's the possibility of joining efforts with other FAPESP programs. These two questions for you, Jean-Paul.
Thank you, Julie. So I think the first one was from Karina about the challenge.
Yeah, both. Yep.
Both are from Karina. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Obviously, I think that the first main challenge is to get funds, but I think we can work without so much fund if we just do calls. But I don't know what Kendra, from her experience, I think that having a physical space where you have the rooms, where you can concentrate people that can do the logistics, that can support the working groups, that will make a lot of difference. So I think that the main challenge is how we can get some partners that can help FAPESP and the universities, state university or federal university, to have this physical infrastructure with a small permanent staff to support the working groups. And if we consider the money invested in this infrastructure and the return, the outcome that we do have for society, both in scientific way, in applied way, in training, I think the balance is very good. So the investment is not so high if we are aware of all the outcomes that we can have from a synthesis center. So maybe the other challenge is to show for people who decide, including within the university, within FAPESP or CNPq, that this is a good balance, it's a good investment. And I think that maybe having this first synthesis group from CNPq and maybe our group showing good results would be a way to convince people that it's worthwhile to invest in the physical infrastructure. So it's a balance of convincing people and having money, but I don't think the amount of money is so big. And the second question was, really sorry.
As the possibility of working or joining the BIOTA with other programs in FAPESP for synthesis.
Yeah. So when we were planning this BIOTA synthesis proposal, the idea was to have both the BIOTA program and the climate change program working together, because those two challenges, they are closely related. So I think the idea now, we will have a discussion in a few minutes, I think so. It's also to involve people from other programs, Biogen, climate change, and BIOTA, to plan together and to make links and to establish collaboration. So this is the plan, to work not only BIOTA alone, but with BIOTA with other programs within FAPESP and to plan together these initiatives.
Thank you, Jean-Paul. And we have a last question for Kendra. I think you mentioned it already during your presentation, but how to make the agencies that are supporting initiatives like Lagos and the BIOTA Center understand that the merit cannot be only on the papers published in very high impact factor journals, but you may have also other results that are as important as here in São Paulo. For instance, we have an idea of helping with the improvement of public policies. How do you have this problem in Lagos of showing that it's not only the publications that are the big results?
Yeah, we have the same problem. I do think it's getting better, though. The National Science Foundation is where I get most of my funding. And over the course of the last 20 years, they have really been able to shift the narrative much more away from only basic research and transformative knowledge that comes out of research, which is often measured by impact factor publications. They have been able to shift it to, they have this, the other category is called broader impacts that they review grants based on. And so the idea that every proposal, and then the ones that are funded, the projects are judged based on both the science, but then also what are the impacts of that science. And so you have to very clearly articulate what those impacts will be. And it can be education related, it can be policy related, it can be management or conservation, right? But you have to really make that case and then follow through with it. And so every year we have to file an annual report to the NSF, and we have to report both on the science and on the broader impacts. And so we are, I do feel like it's getting there. It's certainly not weighted the same, and it really depends on who is reviewing your proposal, how much weight they put on those. But certainly whenever I'm on a panel, I'm very vocal about the importance of that part as well. And so I just think all of us have that work to do, right? To really highlight those impacts, the societal impacts, the broader impacts, and then to be talking about them and reviewing with those in mind.
Oh, thank you very much. And before finishing the session, I would like to thank again Kendra for such a inspiring talk, as I said before, and the experience of living through establishing a group and a synthesis and so on. So thank you very much for your willingness to share all this experience. Also, thanks to Jean-Paul for presenting the idea that what we are planning for this synthesis center, at least in this moment. I would also like to acknowledge the work of the team that is supporting us at FAPESP, the team that for this webinar was led by Vera Serin, but we also had the support of Marcelo Melletti and Gabriela Schmidt, and also the support of the BIOTA communication team, that is Erika Speglish and Paulo Drummond. Thank you all for attending this webinar, and the next webinar in this series will be on the 1st of December. Thank you very much. Have a good day.